There is a sadness, and there is a stillness. America mourns. And then moves on. The empty chair is filled. Lyndon Baines Johnson becomes 36th President of the United States. The making of a president. It begins near the tiny town of Stonewall, Texas. Lyndon Baines Johnson is born on August 27, 1908. A farm boy, son of a pioneering family. The president-to-be shines shoes, washes cars, earning money for college. He teaches for a year in a small school near the Mexican border. A star debater in college, he becomes active in politics. And in 1932, Destiny's Road takes Lyndon Baines Johnson to Washington. Franklin D. Roosevelt is president, the first of 4 presidents that Johnson will know and work with. In World War II, Representative Lyndon Johnson is the first congressman to volunteer as a member of the armed forces. After the war, back to Washington as a senator from Texas. Serving with another veteran of World War II, the young senator from Massachusetts, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Lyndon Baines Johnson becomes an advisor and counselor to presidents, to Harry S. Truman, and to Dwight D. Eisenhower. In 1955, he is elected Majority Leader of the Senate. This is a dedicated public servant who says, "We will be held strictly accountable to a court from which there is no appeal, the American people." There is another life as husband and father on the LBJ Ranch in Texas. But time is ticking away, events are building, a mold of history is taking form. The Democratic Convention, 1960. Lyndon Baines Johnson is nominated to run for the Vice Presidency of the United States. January 1961, with John Fitzgerald Kennedy looking on, Lyndon Johnson is sworn in.
I, Lyndon Baines Johnson,
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
And I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
The Vice President has a desk in Washington, but his office will stretch across the earth. As a youth, Lyndon Johnson had traveled across America on a freight train. Now his travels are to become worldwide. In 1961, when the wall goes up, he is sent to West Berlin as a symbol of America's determination to preserve and defend the freedom of the beleaguered city. To this island of hope in an ocean of desperation, the Vice President brings a promise and a pledge, backed by America and her people. The United States will keep this bastion of freedom free.
I have come across the ocean to Berlin by direction of the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. He wants you to know, and I want you to know, that the pledge he has given to the freedom of West Berlin and to the right of Western access to Berlin is firm. To the people of East Berlin, I would say, do not lose courage, for while tyranny may seem for the moment to prevail, its days are numbered.
In other lands, other people build other walls. Walls that raise hopes, buildings that house dreams, projects in which America and developing nations around the world are partners in progress. Alliance for progress, a commitment to an idea that the world cannot exist with haves and have-nots. Of such programs in Latin America and other emerging areas, Johnson says, it is in the soil of ignorance that poverty is planted. It is in the soil of ignorance that disease flourishes. And it is in the soil of ignorance that communism brings forth the bitter fruit of tyranny. Traveling from continent to continent, country to country, the Vice President looks, listens, sees, hears. A human being interested in other human beings. In the 2 years, 10 months, and 2 days that he is America's Vice President, Lyndon Baines Johnson visits 27 foreign countries, not knowing nor dreaming that these travels will be an invaluable preparation for the most important single office in the free world, the Presidency of the United States. And wherever he goes, whomever he meets, he finds a warm and friendly welcome for himself, his family, and the country he represents. In Europe, Asia, Africa, his wife is by his side, sharing his concern and compassion for all peoples, of all ages, in all lands. A mother with 2 daughters of her own, Mrs. Johnson, is herself an ambassador of goodwill, making friends for America, interested in what any mother anywhere is interested in. In 1961, the Vice President's travels take him to Southeast Asia, a tinderbox of tension, living in the shadows of communist tyranny. In the quiet of a humble home in Thailand, Lyndon Baines Johnson shares the fellowship of free men, the fellowship that knows no boundaries, no barriers, the fellowship that seeks only peace with justice and liberty. The cheers that rain down on the Vice President are, he knows, not for the man alone, but for America. And so he goes among the crowds. As he sees and hears and sees, these people come to know that this visitor and his country care about them and care about their future. Of mankind's pursuit of peace and the 1963 nuclear test ban treaty, Johnson says, "We are not taking any needless risks for peace, nor are we foreclosing the future. We have no desire to perpetuate the dangers of the Cold War and no wish to reject reasonable Russian proposals without fair or adequate consideration." The White House ceremonies marking America's official acceptance of the treaty terms reflect the desire of all citizens, regardless of political party, for an end to mankind's atomic dilemma. The exploration of space. Lyndon Baines Johnson closely follows this too as chairman of the National Aeronautics and Space Council. At missile bases and launching pads, he sees the research and development, science and technology that are opening wide the gateway to the universe. We are not reaching for prestige in space, says Lyndon Johnson. We are reaching for peace. We do not know what the stars will tell us. We do know to default the exploration of space would surely be as catastrophic in its consequences as if we had defaulted exploration of the atom. And so, in 1963, Lyndon Baines Johnson succeeds to the presidency, seeking and imploring the hopes and prayers of the people he must serve and lead.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of the House, members of the Senate, my fellow Americans, all I have, I would have given gladly not to be standing here today. The greatest leader of our time has been struck down by the foulest deed of our time.
Today, John Fitzgerald Kennedy lives on in the immortal words and works that he left behind. He lives on in the mind and memories of mankind.
He lives on in the hearts of his countrymen. I'm here today to say I need your help. I cannot bear this burden alone. I need the help of all Americans in all America. I profoundly hope that the tragedy and the torment of these terrible days will bind us together in new fellowship, making us one people in our hour of sorrow. So let us here highly resolve that John Fitzgerald Kennedy did not live or die in vain.
Out of grief and anguish, shock and sorrow, democracy survives, the Union is preserved, and in the 175th year of life, America, her president, and her people move on and look forward.
This concludes today's presentation of the History Channel Classroom. Thank you for watching. Please join us again on the next edition of the History Channel Classroom.
The preceding program is part of Cable in the Classroom, a free service of the cable communications industry and your local cable company.
We believe in the power of the past
and the promise of the future.
We believe in people who help to make the world a better place,
and in the importance
of those who already have.
We believe the internet will help to revolutionize
education, and that our children
will have the brightest future of us all.
What do you believe?
The power of the past,
the promise of the future.
Do you think you know history? Do you? How fast could a Revolutionary War soldier fire a musket?
Watching Greg was giving me an itchy trigger finger.
It's showtime, ladies! Hoorah!
Mail Call, Monday night at 8 on the History Channel.
Who's the smarty pants now?
Tonight on the History Channel. Over the centuries, the art of engineering has evolved into the science of engineering. Unfortunately, it is not yet an exact science.
We've had a problem here.
Had just one thing been different, the disaster wouldn't have happened.
Engineering disasters on Modern Marvels. Tonight at 10 on the History Channel.
I'm Mike Rowe, and this is The Most. On this episode, demolition. The charges are set. The wires are rigged. There's no turning back now. Witness the destruction of the tallest building ever imploded. Oil, burning completely out of control. Thick smoke, intense flames. The maniacal maneuver that caused the worst oil fires in history. Nature run amok. One tornado's bad enough, but what about 15 touching down at the same time? The awesome destruction of the world's biggest tornado storm. Plus, our most moment, one of the most important moments in history. There's all that and much, much more coming up on The Most. Welcome to The Most, the show that takes history to the extreme. Now, let's be honest. Most of you out there would rather watch a building go down than go up, right? I mean, several years of slow-moving construction isn't nearly as exciting as a few quick minutes of massive demolition. And what could be more mesmerizing than the demolition of Hudson's department store, the tallest building ever imploded? She was the Grand Old Dam of Detroit. Built in 1911, the 23-story tall J.L. Hudson's was the tallest department store in the country, and for a time, the reigning queen of retail. But with the countrywide erosion of urban centers in the 1970s, Hudson's popularity began to wane, and by 1983, her doors could stay open no longer. There she sat, a massive, empty shell, until 1997. That year, hoping to clear the way for new developments, city officials voted to bring the giant down. In stepped James Santoro and his team of demolition experts at Controlled Demolition Incorporated.
J.L. Hudson's was an extremely large building, covering 2.2 million square feet. It was the tallest steel structure that had ever been taken down using explosives, 439 feet tall.
Santoro and his co-workers faced a hair-raising challenge: bring the building down in one
carefully choreographed implosion without reducing its delicate neighbors to rubble. In addition to the sheer size of the structure, the team had some unique hurdles to clear. The Hudson building had been constructed in 12 stages, each with varying degrees of strength. Simply put, some parts of the building would require more explosive than others. And since no original blueprints remained, every inch of the interior had to be examined and tested. Then, it was time for the firepower.
We placed explosives on over 9 levels of the structure. We had over 4,100 charges placed in 1,100 locations. We used approximately 2,700 pounds of explosives. It took us 24 days with 12 people doing nothing but loading explosives.
October 24th, 1998, the day of reckoning for the demolition crew. 36,000 feet of detonating cord was attached to a single ignition button. 10 square blocks were cordoned off. Then, at 5:47 p.m., the 87-year-old felt the first rumble of her demise. Save for a few broken windows and some minor debris damage, it was a demolition triumph. Never before had such an imposing structure been toppled.
Typically, when a building's about to come down, I don't even bother watching anymore. In the case of the J.L. Hudson building, I couldn't resist. I had to watch it. The building was just so big.
A ceremonious end for J.L. Hudson's, the tallest building ever imploded.
Though complex, the Hudson's implosion was a well-executed demolition. Not a hitch in the works, not a scratch to be found on anyone. But things don't always go so well. Witness the botched implosion of Australia's Royal Canberra Hospital, the worst demolition disaster.
July 13th, 1997, the Australian capital of Canberra was abuzz with anticipation. The Royal Canberra Hospital, long since closed and falling into disrepair, had been scheduled for a spectacular implosion. 12-year-old Katie Bender and her family were among the 100,000 spectators gathered on the shores of Lake Burley-Griffin.
They hadn't planned to go to the event. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision as they were driving home that day. They were urged to be there by the government and by the local media, which promoted the event.
1:20 p.m. From what was thought to be a safe distance, some 1,500 feet away, the crowd watched as the first blast of dynamite was detonated. As expected, the old hospital began to cave in on itself. But something was horribly wrong. Misplaced charges had turned the building into a bomb, its debris raining down on the onlookers.
The first thing people noticed was the sound whirring through the air, bits of metal, concrete, and a piece of steel weighing about 1 kilogram hit Katie Bender in the head, and she died instantly.
In total, shrapnel from the exploding building injured 8 people who were rushed to the hospital. Amazingly, in the wake of all that deadly, destructive force, all but one of the spectators escaped with their lives. All but Katie Bender. A criminal inquest has since condemned the demolition company for gross negligence, and the 2 men who oversaw the project have been charged with manslaughter. Perhaps a small comfort to the Bender family, who lost their daughter at the worst demolition disaster in history.
While nothing truly compares with the loss of life, the loss of magnificence can be devastating in its own right. The centuries have seen the destruction of many things, but perhaps nothing quite so extraordinary as New York's Pennsylvania Station, victim of the most regretted demolition. It is a rare and wonderful thing. Clumsy, lifeless slabs of concrete and steel, glass and marble, willed by gifted hands into objects of indescribable beauty, impossible grandeur. In 1910, such a place was born. Pennsylvania Station, where rail passengers took their first glimpse of New York City's industrial glory. Designed by heralded architects McKim, Mead, and White, its massive columns and intricate sculptures skillfully evoked images of ancient Rome, a fitting gateway to a majestic city.
In its time, Pennsylvania Station was considered a great building. It was recognized as a monumental work, a real contribution to the city's landscape. But what's interesting about it is how relatively quickly it lost its grandeur.
Breathtaking architecture alone was not enough to repel the soot and dirt of a bustling metropolis. Soon, the pink granite walls of the crowded concourse began to lose their luster. And with air and auto transport stealing